Cold winds sliced through gaps in the weathered timber, causing the cabin's entrance to creak with haunting melancholy. Elias Boone, a man who had embraced isolation for countless seasons, paused at his doorway with racing pulse. All through the bitter months he had waited. The payment had been made, the agreement confirmed. This was the day his promised companion should have arrived. Yet as the door swung wide, months of eager hope crystallized into horror. Suspended from the central rafter in the shadowy interior, a form hung motionless, its silhouette stretching across the floorboards. The pristine bridal gown was ripped apart, auburn locks cascading to conceal portions of her features. Naked toes swayed in the dancing light of a nearly extinguished lantern. Elias became paralyzed. His weathered Stetson slipped from unaware fingers. Time seemed suspended. This was the woman he had mended every plank for, the one he had adorned his windowsill with wildflowers to greet. A fierce breeze swept inside, causing the hanging figure to move gently. Just as Elias felt his knees giving way, something even more terrifying occurred. Her lashes flickered and a weak sound emerged from her lips like wind through leaves. Life still remained within her. Elias sprang into action, his shaking hands reaching toward the cord wrapped cruelly around the woman's throat. "Merciful Lord, what evil is this?" he breathed. Elias Boone remained motionless beside the suspended figure dangling above. His weathered heart, once numbed by endless tragedies, now quaked like that of an untested youth. He had anticipated this moment when his bride would come to break the crushing solitude within his stark, empty dwelling. Instead, destiny had delivered a vicious and heartless surprise. Past 40 now, Elias had once ridden with the cavalry and witnessed far too much carnage across battlefields. After the conflict ended, he returned bearing rough palms, a scarred frame, and a spirit emptied by sorrow. His beloved wife had perished during an attack by hostile warriors. Soon after, their lone child also couldn't endure. From that point forward, Elias had retreated from society, shunning human contact with only his mustangs and endless twilight hours as companions. His existence had contracted to a patch of barren earth and a deteriorating homestead. Yet the years of isolation had finally driven him toward a choice. He forwarded his life savings to a town agent, requesting help finding a woman willing to begin anew with a struggling cattleman. The response brought a message promising a bride would come on the season's first stagecoach. From that instant, Elias discovered hope reigniting, hope he believed had died forever. He restored every timber wall in his home, cleared away years of grime and cinders, constructed a fresh dining surface from pine lumber, and even arranged some preserved blossoms on the ledge, something untouched since his wife's passing. Each dusk he occupied the front steps, watching for the outline of an approaching coach, envisioning the expression of the woman who would descend and speak his name. Now before him, that same woman dangled from a hangman's knot within the very space he had prepared for her welcome. Elias ground his jaw, his steel-gray gaze blazing fierce in the gloom. He couldn't fathom who had committed this act, or why she'd been delivered in such condition, but within his chest, rage had sparked to life. He wouldn't allow her to perish on what should have been their wedding evening. His work-worn hands tightened around his hunting blade's grip as he moved forward. Each weighted step resonated through the dark dwelling, bringing him nearer to the rope where existence barely clung. The blade quavered slightly in Elias's grasp, its metal surface catching reflections from the fading oil flame. He gazed upward at the wooden crossbeam, where the woman's form still stirred faintly in death's embrace. Every breath she managed was delicate as morning vapor, threatening to disappear instantly. "Stay strong. Death won't claim you," Elias murmured, his tone gravelly and strained. He embraced her body, feeling her collapse against him, then severed the cord with one decisive cut. The thick hemp groaned before snapping with a sharp crack. Her unconscious form fell into Elias's arms. He sank to the floor, cradling her close, as though releasing her would make her fade into darkness. He positioned her on the wooden bunk, his calloused palm clumsily sweeping matted hair from her ashen features. Her mouth was parched, her flesh frigid, yet her chest continued its rhythm. Elias hastily filled a cup from a pitcher, raised her head, and dripped water carefully past her lips. Liquid ran from her mouth's edges, but then her throat contracted, accepting it. Elias noticed a sudden change. Her eyelids trembled and gradually parted. Behind lengthy lashes, her gaze, deep and clouded with suffering, wavered as it attempted to find him. A weak hand rose, grasping his wrist with feeble but determined strength. "Please!" "Help," came the whisper, barely audible, yet it struck Elias like lightning. He nodded, pressing her small fingers within his. "You'll survive. My word on it." Elias quickly ripped fabric from his worn shirt and bound it around her throat where the rope had carved deep red welts. He moved like a man driven, every action harsh yet careful. His attention never wavered from her face, and within his chest swelled an unusual sensation, something beyond obligation, beyond compassion. It was terror of losing something more valuable than his own existence. The oil flame died out, and shadow enveloped the cabin. Elias remained there, still clasping her hand. He heard her labored breathing, felt his own pulse hammering like battle drums, and understood that his existence had transformed completely. She wasn't merely the bride they'd provided. She was a soul he'd rescued from death's clutches, and that would pull him into a tale he'd never dared envision. The flame had expired, leaving only glowing coals on the hearth, painting shadows over two quiet spirits. Elias Boone occupied the bedside, his spine curved, his weather-beaten palm still holding the delicate hand of the woman near him. He feared that releasing her would cause the fragile life before him to vanish like wind-scattered smoke across the plains. The woman released a gentle moan, then her eyes slowly opened. Her stare seemed distant, unclear, yet remained focused on Elias. He leaned closer, his voice deep and rough like stone grinding against stone. "You're protected now. No one will harm you again." She blinked and moisture traced down her pale cheeks. Her lips quivered, forming several fractured words. "They want to kill you too." Elias went rigid. Momentarily, battlefield memories flooded his thoughts. Snares, surprise attacks, shadows lurking in silence. He looked deeply into her eyes and witnessed not merely terror, but a brutal reality he hadn't yet confronted. He poured additional water and patiently assisted her in drinking, one tiny sip each time. Every swallow made her shake, but vitality was gradually returning. Elias took another cloth strip and wrapped it tenderly around her neck, hiding the vicious red marks. Occasionally she spoke in her native language, sounds Elias couldn't comprehend. Yet when their eyes met, something began forming. A delicate trust, clear as a single strand linking two remote souls. The darkness stretched endlessly. Elias didn't rest. He simply remained there, monitoring every breath, every slight movement. Within his heart, something unfamiliar started emerging. Not merely sympathy, not merely duty. It was something profound, an invisible thread drawing him from the heavy shadows he'd inhabited for so many years. The woman, Clara, as he'd faintly heard from one of her mumbled words, still lived. Heaven be praised. Even if fate had delivered her here, shrouded in tragedy. Outside, wind wailed through door cracks, whispering that sunrise approached. Elias knew the lengthy years of solitude were ending, along with the tempests about to descend upon his life. Thank you deeply for joining me. If this tale brought back memories of bygone days and dusty evenings with hoofbeats echoing in your heart, then follow my channel. Each day we can gather once more, and I'll share another story from the frontier. Just as the sky started brightening, still painted with the ash-gray shade of night, the thunder of hooves rang across the grassland, initially scattered, then growing stronger, heavier, like war drums beating. Elias jerked upright, his hand automatically grasping the aged rifle resting against the hearth. On the wooden bed, Clara stirred, her eyes wide with terror, her lips shaking. "They've returned." Elias stepped outside. Before him, crimson dust billowed in dense clouds. From the haze appeared a band of armed men, roughly 10 total, headed by the same marriage broker Elias had once paid. The man's expression twisted with rage, a snarl spreading across his features like a wolf detecting blood's scent. "Well, hello there, Boone," he called, his voice harsh and vicious. "I promised you a bride, didn't I? Well, now you've got one. Too bad this entire cabin's about to become your tomb." The gang erupted in laughter, then lifted their rifles, targeting the old wooden structure. Early morning light reflected off the gun barrels, black, gleaming like predator fangs. Elias drew a deep breath. He recognized this wasn't empty posturing. They'd come to eliminate everything: Clara's attempted murder, his death by gunfire, and the entire incident buried as just another mishap. Inside the cabin, Clara fought to rise, Her hand shook as she pointed toward the entrance. Him! He's the one who tried to murder me. Elias turned, his gray gaze meeting hers, and within them he witnessed desperate trust. He gave her a slight nod. Then he stepped fully outside, rifle raised, his voice low and hoarse, yet resonating with determination. You won't touch her. If blood is what you seek, take mine. That statement ignited the air like flame to tinder. The broker shouted a command. Gunfire exploded, bullets cutting through air and crashing into wooden walls. Elias dropped, rolled across the porch, and returned fire. His first shot toppled a rider from his mount, sending the animal into screaming panic. Gunsmoke filled the atmosphere. The cabin trembled under the bullet storm. Inside, Clara pressed against the wall, her fingers clutching bed linens, eyes locked on the silhouette of the solitary man battling a pack of savage beasts outside. The entire prairie held its breath, and Elias Boone knew this was the fight that would determine survival, not just his own, but for the woman he'd saved from the noose just one night before. Gunsmoke covered the dusty red ground before the cabin. Each bullet sliced through morning air, mixing with horses' shrill cries and men's shouts, creating chaos's symphony. Elias Boone, his scarred back pressed low behind decaying wooden cover, fired his rifle with controlled breathing and lethal accuracy. One gunman barely emerged from behind a boulder before a bullet found his forehead. He toppled backward, eyes still open, gazing at sky as blood-soaked earth. Two others rushed the front entrance, yelling and shooting wildly. Elias retreated, reloaded, then burst through a side window, delivering two precise shots. Both men fell like grain sacks. Boone! The broker bellowed, his voice breaking with fury. He crouched behind his saddle, eyes burning crimson with hatred. You think you can oppose me? You're nothing but a lonely old cattleman. That girl won't rescue you. Elias released a weary, bitter chuckle. His voice cracked like stone tumbling down a precipice as he shouted back, At least I possess something you never will, the bravery to defend a life. Gunfire resumed. A bullet pierced through Elias's wide hat brim, leaving a scorched opening. He rolled, diving into a shallow depression, heart pounding like thunder. In that instant, old battlefield memories returned. Days of gripping a rifle alongside comrades, understanding fear, and how survival came only to the determined. From within the cabin, Clara called out hoarsely, Elias, behind you! He spun just in time to see the broker charging forward, pistol aimed directly at his chest. In that moment, everything decelerated. Sunlight cutting through smoke, the cruel lines of his enemy's weathered face, the hiss of breath through clenched teeth. Elias pulled the trigger. A thunderous crack split the air. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously. Elias felt searing pain tear across his side. But the broker suddenly froze, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed to earth, blood soaking his chest. The sneer on his lips faded into silence. The prairie grew still again. Only gunpowder haze lingered, horses' ragged breathing, and Elias Boone standing tall, blood staining his shirt, the heavy rifle still gripped in his hands. Inside the cabin, Clara collapsed onto the bed, tears flowing like a burst dam. She knew he hadn't pulled the trigger just to save himself. He'd fought to preserve the fragile possibility for both their lives. Smoke began clearing, leaving behind gunpowder's acrid scent hanging over the red, dusty yard. The gunmen's bodies lay scattered around the cabin. Their horses had fled in terror, hoofbeats fading into the vast prairie. Elias stood motionless, his calloused hand still gripping the rifle, his chest rising and falling. The wound at his side throbbed with pain, blood soaking through his shirt, but he remained standing, and alive. Inside the cabin, Clara struggled to sit upright. Her body trembled, but her eyes blazed bright. When Elias entered, her lips quivered as she whispered, You saved me again. Elias knelt beside her, setting the rifle down and placing a steady hand on her shoulder. No one will ever harm you again, Clara. I swear it. His voice was rough, but the words rang like a vow. Outside, new hoofbeats echoed across the land. Elias tensed, lifting the rifle once more. But this time it wasn't the enemy. It was neighbors from surrounding ranches, drawn by the thunderous gunfire. Broad-shouldered men on horseback circled the clearing, rifles ready. One dismounted, eyes scanning the destruction in disbelief. Boone, what in blazes happened here? Elias looked around, then pointed to the dead broker lying in his blood pool. He set a trap, hung my bride to lure me to death. He wanted land. He wanted money. Now he's paid the price. The neighbor clicked his tongue and shook his head. Whispers of missing women around town suddenly made sense. So those devils were behind it all, he muttered, then looked at Elias differently. No longer as a reclusive old rancher, but as a man who'd stood against evil. They helped Elias gather bodies, collect weapons, and extinguish small fires still smoldering on the cabin roof. Clara was assisted onto the porch. Her face remained pale, but her gaze was steady. For the first time, she stood in daylight with no rope around her neck. Elias sat on the front step, blood still seeping from his side, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Clara gently rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just save my life. You saved everything I am." Elias squeezed her hand softly, his gray eyes catching the morning sun's glow. He knew without doubt this cabin would never be empty again. Clara was now part of his destiny, and he would protect her until the end. Dawn finally arrived, golden light spilling across the prairie after a long night shrouded in gun smoke. Elias Boone's cabin still stood, its wooden walls riddled with bullet holes. The roof tilted but holding firm, just like the man himself, weathered. Wounded but unbroken, Clara sat on the front step. An old blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes still held traces of pain, but within them now gleamed a spark of light. Her hand gripped Elias's, trembling but certain, as if holding tight to the path he'd carved for both of them. Elias gazed toward distant fields where red dust was slowly fading in the morning sun. All winter he'd waited alone, hoping a bride would come, someone to hold on to through his remaining days. When that door opened, he saw death hanging in that small room. He thought his hope had turned to ash, but in that moment of despair, he found something that war and loss had stolen from him long ago, a reason to continue. The woman sitting beside him wasn't just the bride sent by a corrupt broker. Clara was proof that even in the wild heart of the West, there were still lives worth saving. Sometimes a single act, cutting a rope, preserving a fragile breath, could be enough to change fate's course. A neighbor returned and placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You did right, Boone. Folks will remember this night. No one will look down on you ever again." Elias only nodded, his eyes fixed on the rising sun. He knew he hadn't yet found a perfect home, but he'd discovered something deeper, a truth that echoed louder than any bullet. The West doesn't grant happiness to those who wait in silence. It only gives it to those who stand up, who protect, who love, even when death lurks nearby. Clara rested her head gently on Elias's shoulder, her eyes closing in a rare moment of peace. Elias sat upright, one hand resting on the old rifle across his knees. Their shadows stretched long across the ground, mingling in morning light. In that quiet moment, Elias whispered as if speaking only to himself, "Joy doesn't come from what we desire, but from what we dare to hold on to with compassion and bravery. The unforgiving West has taught me this. Happiness doesn't come from waiting. It comes from the moment we dare to stand and protect life. Sometimes it's as simple as cutting a rope. Sometimes it means aiming a gun at evil. But it's that courage that transforms loneliness into a home and despair into hope. At last, I just want to live a joyful, peaceful life. Thank you, my friends. Now tell me what you felt while listening to this story. Leave a comment below. Press the like button if this tale moved you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next thrilling story from the Wild West.